I thought I knew how to write a book, and then book 2 of the Mordreigiau Chronicles came along and changed just about everything I know about writing. Hi, my name's Shawler. I'm an artist and a writer, and I write the Mordreigiau Chronicles, which is a fantasy romance series over on Substack at projectstarfish.substack.com. It is about a young Regency-era woman who has a vision of ecological collapse of the entire world and goes forth to save it, with the help of sea dragons and some Arthurian treasures. It is free to read over on Substack, so I hope you'll go and check that out after you've watched this video. In my pre-publication and post-publication or during publication life, I had a very particular way as to how I would write. I would do character sheets. I would list out who they were, their archetypes, physical description, mental hang-ups, baggage, the whole bit. And I would do the same for all the characters. Well, female lead, male lead, and villain, because remember, I'm writing romances. And once I had the characters, and of course I had a germ of an idea to begin with as well, I would start plotting it all out to see if it had some legs. And I would do it with a rising story, a turning point, there'd be a little dip, another turning point, until it rises to a climax and has to be all resolved at the end for that happy ending that a romance needs. I thought this was going to work for book 2, which is very much a continuation of book 1. Not to spoil anything. So I'm going to try and keep this as vague as possible for book 2, or by the time I'm seeing this, it's probably already finished, so you can go binge read it. Just hit the next chapter button. But I'm pretty much going to be maybe dropping a spoiler here and there up to chapter 12 in book 2, and I'll try not to spoil beyond that point, theoretically. So this series is an alternate history. In book 1, small spoiler, there is a historical date, and that is Napoleon's surrender, marking the end of the Napoleonic Wars they all hoped in 1814. I think the surrender date was in March of 1814. Our characters find out in early April because there was no instantaneous communication back then. It was interesting to figure out how long it would take somebody to find out when something happened on the continent. I needed some sort of impetus for 2 of our characters to kiss. I'm trying to keep this as vague as possible. And so the reason became Napoleon's surrender and the nationwide celebrations that happened. So that was a date that everything had to hook into. And I had to back plan the diary entries leading up to that point. Still haven't spoiled anything for you, but there's a kiss. Surprise! It's a fantasy romance. I'm looking at my notes so I don't forget anything. A Sword for Wellington, which is currently book 3 that I'm editing right now, was meant to be book 2. But because of the alternate history, the next date that I had hooking everything in A Sword for Wellington is the Battle of Waterloo, which is an entire year later. And I thought I could just pick up the characters a year later and off they'll go. And then I'm like, so does she end up with male lead number 1, Jasper, or male lead number 2, Lear? Or is it just a state of constant indecision for the entire year between book 1 and book 2? I found some old footage of past me talking about book 2, so I'm going to scatter those in through here. But first, here's a picture of how I felt when I hit that wall with what I thought was book 3 and then suddenly became book 2. And so back to past me, who at this point is still optimistic about being able to replot a whole book to cover a year of missing time. I've collected some writing prompts. So the plan is, I've printed them out. I'm going to cut them up into strips, fold them up, and pull them out at random. Because while I have decided that the story is going to start a year later after the end of the last book, I still need to know what happened in the year between the end of the last book and the beginning of the next, because it affects the characters and their relationships. It affects the goals of the book. Yes, so I'm going to draw some prompts at random and we'll see where they take me, and hopefully that will get me to a place where I know what's happened in the year between 1814 and 1815 when the story picks up again, and
I'll have them there for backfill as needed.
I realized after plotting everything out that I was having the romance happen off stage. And when you're writing fantasy romance, the romance needs to happen on stage. So, I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not writing or updating, because The Sword for Wellington was already kind of written. I guess I'm writing a whole new book between A Grail for Idathea and A Sword for Wellington. Okay, so let's figure that out. The way that I write is to handwrite the story, and I have these notebooks that I got from Daiso, and then I'm now picking up at other places because Daiso doesn't stock them anymore, to handwrite with a fountain pen. It's a whole aesthetic to handwrite these, realizing as I was writing out these scenes that I had no real sense of how much time had passed. Was it a week, a day, a month between each of these scenes? And so not only did I need to keep track of the plot and the story and the real events that happened in history, but I needed to keep track of how long this was all taking. And when I did a quick check, I realized that what I had written was probably only going to take up a couple of months, and I needed a year. Not only that, as I was writing things, I would think of other scenes that need to be written, so I would go and write those scenes. And when you're handwriting, that's a lot of go to page X, go to page 22, go back to page 50, just to keep track of all the scenes, and I was losing track. And in fact, I had started rewriting scenes that I had already written because it was just a huge hot mess, schmozzle. So I also needed help unbrambling that because I was getting completely messed up, and there was no way I was going to handwrite it a second time just to get everything in the right order. So I needed something to sort that out, and I needed something to sort out how it was flowing through the year so I could, keep the story moving. But I didn't want to give up the whole idea of handwriting, but I needed to sort out the mess. So enter Scrivener. This is not a sponsored post, but Scrivener saved my butt on this. I was able to set up a field in the overview that showed the date, and I had a location field, so I knew where things were happening, so I could keep that balance going as well. So, 4 days later, I had learnt how to use Scrivener. It took me a day to go through the whole tutorial. I had typed in my bramble of scenes. I had sorted it into the right order. I had merged scenes that I had written twice, so I had the best bits of both. And then there's also a corkboard view where you can work out the plotting of it. So I switched to that. So yeah, we're still using the old way of writing in a sense. Scrivener was helping me sort out all the tangles, but I was still, plotting it out to figure out what was going to happen next. And so book 2 becomes, spoiler, Idathea's story of how she becomes a part of the Chosen Court. And the Chosen Court is the group that is going to be able to save the world from ecological collapse. With me? So what I did was I replotted. I did some good old-fashioned, okay, this happens. How does character A feel about it? How does character B feel about it? What is the aftermath, the consequences? And then basically plotted out a whole other novel. Well, I still plan to write the first draft. Second draft is going to happen in Scrivener. So I have taken what I have written. I'm in the process of typing it into Scrivener. And I have set up a Scrivener file that is all the books within the Mordreigiau Chronicles, seeing where the gaps are. There's like a place in Scrivener where you can make notes to yourself to go like, check this. What about that earlier scene? That kind of thing. Yeah, so once I've got what I've written sorted out, then I can start dropping in the plotting scene cards, and then I can go back and then write the rest of it. And I'm still going to write it here because it's still like work. If I type it into the computer, I said this will be the fun part. I will hopefully be able to print out like a list of scenes and just go from there to do scenes. I think I can do that. Yeah, I can work that out later. So I wrote the whole book, got through the year, had everything planned out, thought I knew who Idathea was going to end up with, and then as I'm going through reading it, to edit it through, she declares her love, and I didn't believe it. And I'm like, well, maybe it just needs to be rewritten. I rewrote it. I still didn't believe it. I didn't think the character was telling me, no, this is not the person that I love. Sorry. And I'm like, this is the person I want you to love. Do it. This is the plot. And so this is when the characters told me I got my plotting all wrong. So what to do? I could just finish the story as is and let it go out into the world and everybody would be happy. There are fans as to who she was declaring her love for. They like this guy. But this is all about honoring the process. So if she wasn't declaring love for this guy, the whole reason for book 2 just went away because exit the romance. Stage left. What to do? And I thought, well, maybe I'm officially writing a slow burn romance. maybe she just needs a little more time. And so to save the story, because now it's actually quite important to see how she starts to come into her own in the Chosen Court, I created another romance. And so there's a subplot romance with a little bit of a cold case murder mystery that now happens in book 2, just so I can continue to call it a fantasy romance as opposed to a straight fantasy. But I did get them to the point where they needed to look for that sword. So, success. That is how book 2 changed my writing. It changed my writing because I started listening to the characters instead of just plowing through the plot, and ended up rewriting almost the entire book and adding a whole new section into it just in order to call it a romance still, because the slow burn was so slow burning you'd be wondering if it was actually ashes and not something that was still sparking. There are definite sparks. I actually just finished scheduling everything for publication at the time of filming this for the rest of book 2, and I'm like, there is some heartbreaking stuff in here. Anyway, now we know what happens in the missing year between Napoleon's surrender in late March of 1814 to his escape from the Isle of Elba in early 1815. I'm now very much more of a discovery writer. I do prompts with the characters just to see what comes out. Some very interesting stuff has come out in book 2. Stuff that I probably would never have plotted or dreamed up myself. The characters so far are coming up with better ideas. Next time I'm going to talk about editing a manuscript because that's what I'm currently doing with book 3. I'll give you a brief overview of where this book 3, A Sword for Wellington, has come from. I'll talk about the editing process. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you have any questions or comments, just put them down below. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you want to read the fantasy romance, the Mordreigiau Chronicles, book 1, A Grail for Idathea, and book 2, A River Trembles, that's over at projectstarfish.substack.com. It is free to read, and you can just read it on the computer without even subscribing because I have the next chapters all set up, so you can just keep going to the next one. Or you can even subscribe. I know, just an email and it's free. I don't ever plan to charge for it unless, life circumstances drastically change that I need to actually ask for money. But do not foresee that happening, knock on wood, or Formica. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time here on YouTube or over on Substack. Take care. Bye.